managing challenging behaviors. But before we understand how to manage the behaviors, it is essential that we understand what are these behaviors, how are these behaviors happening, and what is going on with the child. So many of the research, and as well as myself, I personally feel that challenging behaviors are the ways the children try to communicate with us. So whatever you see and whatever is visible in front of us is something that a child is trying to communicate, maybe because they don't know how to appropriately communicate, or they are not able to, find the correct ways to communicate with us. A lot of times, it is also observed that the challenging behaviors are learned over a period of time based on the kind of responses they are receiving from the individual that is, in front of them or is available in the similar environment. So what is it that's happening? What is the challenging behavior in terms of when they're trying to communicate? How is this challenging behavior becoming a habit? Is something that we're going to understand through the entire presentation that we're going to see now. So challenging behavior, as I said, is a way of communication wherein the children are able to express themselves. Whether it is appropriate or inappropriate, that is irrelevant. But that is something that they're communicating and how they're trying to express. This can happen in different environments. We see challenging behaviors in our school environment. We see challenging behaviors sometimes parents see at home, or maybe we've seen a lot of times this happening in the parks or malls or other places where the children go. So we have to remember that the problem is the learning, not the child. So we have to keep the child up aside from the behavior and not focus on the child as a problematic child. That is something that we are going to look at. But I also want to mention a specific point here that when we are saying a challenging behavior, we're not only targeting special needs students here, because there may be students with challenging behavior without any diagnosis as well. So you don't really need a specific diagnosis to have a challenging behavior. And points to remember that we have specifically here is that challenging behavior is something that we call it when it interferes with child's learning or the development or the success that they can achieve in a particular task. Because say, for example, there is a behavior that as an individual, I feel appropriate, but a second individual walks in the environment and doesn't feel that, it's an appropriate behavior. Might be one teacher who's very specific about children sitting on the chair, straight and looking forward, but the other teachers might be just comfortable with children, fidgeting a little or putting their hands on the table or just, sitting behind. So it is definitely important to understand that challenging behavior is something that's going to hinder the child's learning, development, as well as the success of a particular task that is being assigned. And it could be harmful to the child himself or the surrounding environment or the adults in the similar environment that we have. So unless and until these two major criteria are being met, there could be a possibility that the child is just throwing a tantrum. It's not a challenging behavior that you need to oversee over a period of time. So there are many behaviors that we know can be considered as difficult behaviors to deal with. So we're going to look at specific behaviors which are visible in the classroom environment, wherein you can see that the child is withdrawing from the activity, is not really willing to participate in the task. Or there could be a completely different scenario wherein the defiance is there. So you're trying to give instructions, you're trying to provide, activities to the student, but the child himself or herself is defiant, doesn't want to participate, or literally, says no to every instructions that you're providing in the classroom. There could be instances wherein you see a lot of destructive behavior or aggressive behavior towards the material available in the environment, or self-injurious behavior as well in certain situations. We see some of the students in the classroom are loners. They don't like to socialize so much and participate in the activities. So wherein you're doing pair activities or group activities, you will see that they prefer to do these activities individually, or they would just want to sit at the back of the class. There are a lot of times when we know that some students feel that they don't have any power or they don't have any authority. That's also some of the difficulties that you can face in the classroom environment. There are chances that you see lack of social skills. So as I said earlier, students who are loners, who like to do activities alone. So there could be a possibility that they lack the social skills. They know, or maybe they want to participate in certain situations, but they're not really comfortable, or they don't really know how to communicate in certain situations which are happening in the peer environment. And also, there are times when you will see a lot of escape behavior. So this is majority of the times is visible when an activity is such that the child might be finding it very challenging to complete. So they look at escaping from that class or behavior that they can just do away with the situation. Sometimes we also see that there is a lot of calling out that happens in the classroom. So children just blurt out the answers and you're asking them to wait for their turns, but they're not letting other children listen. So all of these behaviors are some behaviors that we see or we consider as difficult behaviors or challenging behaviors to deal with in the classroom environment. I think, but I would like to recall one of the statements that was said by Ms. Kanika in one of the MTMR, that but we have to consider that he or she is not giving you a hard time. The child herself or himself is having a hard time. So that is when the challenging behavior is happening. So we don't have to really blame the child for the behavior. We have to see that what is the child going through at that given point of time. This is something that I really like, because I know that parents or teachers, a lot of times when challenging behaviors are happening, they think about these things. They consider these things somewhere at the back of their mind, even if they're trying their best to, accommodate the child in the classroom. They still feel that, oh, I don't think so this child belongs here. Or maybe, because of this child, I'm not able to continue the learning in my class. What are the other children learning? Or maybe some of the teachers might feel that I do not have the training to deal with this kind of a situation. Or the child, teacher's really confused about that she cannot predict what's going to happen next. So it is difficult or challenging for them to plan out the session. Or they can be very concerned about, safety of the children, other children in the classroom environment. And I would say that it is very obvious and it is expected out of a teacher who's not trained enough to manage the challenging behavior in the classroom environment. So it is completely okay to feel this way, that you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling inadequate in terms of not having enough strategies to deal with in the classroom environment. But we have to also see that a child can make, with the challenging behavior, make the teacher feel very inadequate. But are we letting the child make you feel that way, or you're going to work around it and find out strategies to cope with the challenging behavior? So it is essential that we spread awareness about how these behaviors are happening, why these behaviors are happening. And unless the teachers are aware about it, it is difficult to manage those behaviors in the classroom environment. So we know that, as I said, that behavior is a way of communication wherein the child is trying to express themselves. So we know a child is not always what it seems. So we all know that there's only 10% of the iceberg that we can actually see that's above. And that's the behavior that we are seeing in the classroom environment or in the home environment. But what is hiding behind it? It could be a social factor, it could be an emotional factor, it could be an ecological factor. So we're looking at whether the thoughts are such, what is the home environment, how much attention the child is getting at home, whether the parents are giving enough attention or time to the child or not. In the school environment, whether the child is being bullied, what are the environment, stressors that are there in the classroom. There could be a possibility that whenever the child was trying to participate in the classroom discussion, other children laughed at him or giggled. So now the child has stopped participating and he rather seeks attention through, challenging behaviors. There could be other factors wherein we look at specifically anger and aggression. So one domain wherein the child is not able to have any kind of authority, then they look out for, their taking out that anger and aggression in the other forms and how they can, gather attention in the classroom environment. We're also looking at self-esteem issues about how the child's confidence level is, whether they feel that they are right or they always need reassurance from other people to go ahead or attempt a task or complete an activity. That's also something very, very important for a teacher to understand, that when a certain behavior is occurring, how is it, what were the background information that we need to consider at this given point of time. As we all know that there are a lot of ways that we know that children can display their anxiety. So if a child is anxious or a child is not feeling up to it, there could be a way that they're showing aggression, they're showing lack of focus or avoidance or negativity. So when we are observing these behavior in the classroom environment, if it is anger that we are seeing, if it's difficulty in sleeping that we are seeing, or we are seeing defiance or avoidance, we have to consider that it can be related to anxiety, or it can be related to other factors, as we just discussed about home environment, social, economical factors, and what is the mood or the scenario was before that the behavior is occurring. Now, what we need to do is, the important thing is to understand the ABC of behavior. And when I say ABC, it's actually ABC when we talk about behavior. So A is something that is happening before the behavior. So we call it antecedent. So we have to consider that, okay, the behavior happened. What happened right before the behavior, and what was the trigger? It could be a possibility that there was a certain trigger that made the behavior to happen. Then B is definitely, of course, the behavior that we're talking about. What is the kind of behavior the child is displaying? Whether it's self-injurious, whether it's aggression, or being quiet, or withdrawing from an activity. Then we look at the consequence, that what is the outcome of the behavior? Is there something that's happening after the behavior because of which the child starts behaving in a certain way? So that's something we call ABC, and understanding the behavior pattern. So here we can see just one example of how antecedent, behavior, and consequence work in a certain situation. So, for example, there was a child who was, going home from the bus ride, and suddenly he was bullied in the bus, or he was laughed at, or there were group of children who were saying something to him, and then that was something that upset him. That was the antecedent. He goes back home, and something in the communication with the parent, he just shuts the mother up, and then he gets grounded. What's the consequence? That he gets grounded. But did the mother or the parent at home try to identify that why he was angry? What happened before that? So there could be a reason that, so his past experience in the bus ride was such that his behavior that came out, and the anger, the aggression that came out on the mother, was not supposed to be there. So instead of asking about what happened, why he's angry, he was just, as a consequence, he was grounded. So that is something where we need to really understand that when we're looking at antecedents, behaviors, and consequences, there could be specific times. So I can give an example of classroom environment, wherein a child is throwing a tantrum in the classroom, shouting out, calling out the answers and things like that. And the teacher asks the child to walk out of the classroom and stand outside. So there are situations wherein the children look at these opportunities of just walking out of the classroom and standing out because they're not interested in what's happening in the classroom. So your consequence was such that made the child behave and inappropriately in the classroom environment, so that they can escape out of the situation that was happening in the classroom environment, which was challenging for them, or it was difficult, or they were not able to complete the task. Before we begin with strategies, there is an important point that we need to consider, that managing behavior is one thing, but we need to look at how we can assess it, how we can manage it, and then how we can actually prevent it. Because once the behavior is happening, you can manage it. But there are ways that you can also prevent it from happening. And that is something that we're going to watch in the video, along with some strategies that are there.
During the past year, Anne Fitzgerald school staff focused on 3 universal design for learning strategies to address challenging behaviors in the classroom. Working on these 3 strategies gave the staff a collective understanding of how to respond to unwanted behaviors. Planned ignoring is a skill that children can learn that allows them to remain on task in response to any disruption in or outside of the classroom. When students are able to focus their attention away from disruption, it allows the classroom teacher the opportunity to respond to the situation with his or her full attention and allows the students to continue learning. In the event the disruption involves another student in the classroom or school, it also allows for the child who is encountering the difficulty to have his or her dignity preserved by having time and space to work through the problem. Positive reinforcement is anything that follows a behavior and increases the chances the behavior will happen again in the future. The key to successfully implementing systems that increase desired behaviors include choosing a specific behavior that will be rewarded, teaching the students exactly what the desired behavior looks like through modeling, practicing the desired behavior, immediately providing positive reinforcement after the behavior occurs. The student needs to be motivated by the reward.
My goal is to use rewards for a short period of time so that behavior that they're acting in order to get a reward will soon come automatic. So you don't need the reward after a while.
Appropriate consequences means matching a consequence to a behavior that is appropriate for a given student. These consequences will be different depending on the needs of the student. For example, an appropriate consequence for a student who is engaging in disruptive behavior to access attention is to use planned ignoring. It is important before giving a consequence to give a clear instruction and a warning about what the consequence will be to the student so that they have the opportunity to correct their behavior.
I think some children, and I see this all the time, they just need an outlet. A lot of times they do want to do the work, but they either don't know how and are too shy or have anxiety and just don't ask. So part of my job is kind of looking at them as an individual, and this is what our EBS really stresses, is does the consequence, is it logical for this particular child?
It is important to realize that the negative consequences can be emotionally damaging to a child, so they should be applied carefully and appropriately. When working with students who exhibit challenging behavior, it is essential to teach students the skills necessary to self-regulate and appropriately manage themselves.
I think the video very clearly defines that what are the different ways that we can, deal with challenging behavior. And I really like the first point. If you focused on the fact that one teacher was teaching and the other teacher was acting as distraction during the classroom sessions to make the children understand that how distractions can be ignored. So they're looking at planned ignoring, but they're not putting the child as a primary focus here. Because then that's what they said, that it gives the child to then, maintain their dignity by not being focused and saying that, okay, because this child behaves that way, so we have to ignore this particular child. So they're not learning planned ignoring that way. They're learning planned ignoring with the collaboration between the teachers available in the classroom, that one teacher is right in front and teaching and the other teacher is trying to distract the students, and the children are deliberately learning to ignore that distraction and trying to focus. So similar situation that if occurs with another student, it is something that the children can understand and learn with. As I always say, that it is very essential for a teacher to keep the entire class in focus rather than putting the focus on one child who's having challenging behaviors. Because if you sensitize your class, if your children know how to behave or respond in certain situations, that makes half of your job easy. So from there, you can begin your work ahead rather than also managing the rest of the classroom along with the child who's having, certain challenging behaviors. So that's something that we have to consider in mind. So we understood that there were causes that we were looking at, could be attention, could be protection, or the control or justice. Now we're going to look at how we can manage, as the video suggested, that we have to act calm. So we're looking at a 5 steps managing challenging behavior, which is called ADAPT. So we're looking at acting calm. As an adult, we have to understand that children can push boundaries and they can really get into our nerves to make us feel angry and agitated in certain situations. But at the end of the day, we are the adults, so we have to ensure that we are maintaining our calm, and we can be calm but assertive instead of being rude or screaming at the child. We just need to be calm but assertive so that the child understands that whatever you're expecting is something that you're expecting. You're not going to let go of it, but you're maintaining your cool and calm, and you're not really screaming and shouting on the child. We have to also ensure that we're not de-escalating, de-escalating the matter, because if you keep focusing on what the child is doing that's negative, the focus of the entire conversation becomes negative, and rather you talk about something that the child did positive. Or you can always say that, let's talk about this later, or reflect on it, sit down for a while, think about it, reflect on what you just did, and we're going to talk about it once you cool down or you calm down. Acknowledge the feelings. As I said, never focus the challenge or the behavior on the child, but the feeling of the child, and acknowledge that you understand how the child is feeling and you're trying to help the child rather than, removing them away from the situation or making them as focus of the problem. We're also looking at how you're problem solving the particular situation. Are you brainstorming the solution with the child? Because I think nowadays we don't call these things as class rules. So there are no rules because children are very smart these days. That's why they're called as essential agreements. And when you call them as agreements, you've made them with the children. So they themselves are accountable for what they've written in those essential agreements, and they take the onus and the responsibility to follow through them. Because in the old times, when we used to say just class rules, so they're like teacher-made class rules that all the students have to follow, and the children really feel that you're trying to just impose the instructions and rules in the classroom and you have the authority. So nowadays, when we start giving those choices and open communication to the children, they feel responsible about their behavior, and it is important that they get involved in the essential agreement. So when they are creating the problem, let them also come up with a solution or brainstorm with them that how they can actually manage their own behaviors and think reflectively. I would say this is the most important aspect in this ADAPT, because as adults, as teachers, as parents, sometimes we feel that because children are children and they're younger than us, they have to follow our instructions and they have to listen to us. But there could be times when we are at fault and we have to accept that as a mistake and let the children know that as an adult, you are open about accepting mistakes and you do not feel any shame in saying that you're wrong. Because when they see as adult role models who are reflecting on their behavior, they learn from that. And it becomes easier for them to reflect on their own behavior then. There are some additional things that we can look at when we are providing strategies apart from ADAPT. We're looking at maximizing the structure and the predictability of the classroom. So in a lot of situations, we've seen that challenging behaviors occur when the structured classrooms are not there, or the children cannot predict what's going to happen. And unpredictability is something that creates anxiety in a lot of children. So we have to make sure that if you're looking at transition from one activity to another, the children are pre-informed about it. Or if there is a change that's going to happen in their day's schedule or the location of a particular activity, it's always good to give that information prior to the students so that in their mind, they're prepared and they know what's coming. So the change is not actually creating that anxiety within the children. So the structure and predictability of the class or the day is very important. And offer choices. So I've seen that choices matter a lot these days, and especially in the classroom environment when we are giving an activity. It is not appropriate or enough challenging, or maybe too challenging to a child. The behavior starts, coming in. So if you are giving choices to children it could be in terms of, presentation, how they can present the information that they have learned. Maybe they can create a song, or they can, act out, or give an oral or a video presentation, or write down, or maybe illustrate. Or it could be a situation wherein the task that you're giving itself is a choice for them. So this is something that is expected out of you, and maybe you can choose whether you want to do it this way or that way. So choices, when you provide to children, it becomes very easy for them to understand and to, reflect upon their task and then express. So expression is something that we're focusing on here. We're also looking at stated expectations. So like the video said, that when you are specifying a particular behavior, you have to be very particular about what is that you're expecting. You can't say, I want you to be a good boy or a good girl. What is the definition of being a good boy or a good girl? What is the exact behavior that you're expecting out of them? Maybe you want them to sit down in their chair for like 10 minutes. Give them that specific time about how long do you want them to sit down in the chair. You do not want them to scream in the classroom, but what is that you want them to do in the classroom is something very important that we have to tell them that this is what is expected. Because unless it is very, very, clear in terms of your words, the child might not be able to understand, because there are times when the challenging behaviors are associated with communication skills. So if they're not able to express, they might not be able to receive the information that you're providing. So it is essential that our words express very clearly that what is the expected outcome that we have. And the first and the most important, I think, is here that mutual accountability, the trust and the support. So as an authority, we can't behave in the classroom. We have to ensure that the children respect you because you deserve that respect, because you have that kind of mutual understanding. You support the children and you are committed to changing the behavior in the classroom environment. But I also know that all of these strategies and changes are not so easy. So that is why we have to specifically avoid certain situations, certain behaviors of the responses that we're providing in the classroom environment. That's no sarcastic comments, please, because even if you're not saying something and you're just rolling your eye in the classroom and when the teacher walks in, that's clearly something, a visual clue for the child to understand that, okay, my teacher doesn't like me, or I did something that the teacher didn't like. So we have to, as an adult, become actors or, presenters wherein our facial expressions cannot give away what we are thinking internally. And of course, now physical punishment or, that's something that we have to completely avoid, because hitting as parents, hitting the children really does not help or take us anywhere. And I am sure this is not something that's happening in the schools nowadays. Withholding food and meals at home, if you're saying, okay, you're not supposed to get this, you will not get it if you're going to do this, that's really not, so you're relating the child's needs to something that he has done, which is not, again, appropriate for us to do. Public humiliation. So if you're trying to make the child understand what they did, speak to them one-on-one. Have that conversation with them individually rather than humiliating them in front of the entire class and saying that because you did this, you are a bad boy, or, Instead of that, have that one-on-one private conversation with them wherein you tell them that this is what you didn't like, how they are supposed to improve it, and what is it you're going to look forward in the next conversation that you're going to have with them in the next so and so number of days. We're also looking at any threats about security. So a lot of teachers have the tendency of saying that, I'll report you to the coordinator, I'll call so and so teacher, I'll take you to the principal's office. If you say that, at that given point of time, you just lose out your own authority. So it is essential for us to take the onus, discuss and mutually understand what the scenario is, and take the action then and there, rather than, of course, I mean, if the issue is so big that you have to escalate it, that's a different matter. But as long as possible, try to manage it at your own level rather than threatening the child with, higher authorities, or I'm going to complain to your parents and things like that. Now, how are these things going to happen? Because sometimes we have to think, unlearn something before we learn certain things that we need to change. So I really strongly believe in this, that we have to learn, then we might have to unlearn to actually relearn some things to change our attitude and behavior towards the children in the classroom or our own children at home. There are different stages of unlearning, and there is no harm in being at a different stage, because it's a process that we have to focus. We can be at a stage where we're still embracing the fact that there is variability in the classroom, and we have to make sure that our classroom is inclusive. That's absolutely fine, as compared to a teacher who already knows the differences in the classroom and manages the behaviors in different ways. So it is essential that we know that we have to unlearn. Whatever stage you are on is something that is a process that we have to go over a period of time. at the end, I would just say that we have to remember that as adults, we also remember our teachers who were kind to us, who were compassionate, and they were patient with us. Even we remember the teachers who gave us hard times, and we remember the teachers who were always willing to support us or genuinely wanted to accommodate our needs in the environment. So I think with that slide, I would end my presentation, Kanika. In case there are questions, I'll be happy